kind, more like the people in the world seeking perspectives with a different line. The kids who share their interests together with a similar kind.
Welcome to another episode of Hard NOC Life. I'm your host, Keith Chow. We got a special show tonight. We are talking all things Man of Steel. I have two writers with me. You may have heard of these guys. They're these up-and-coming comic book writers known as Gene Yang and Greg Pak, and both are with me tonight. Welcome to Hard NOC Life, fellas.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Keith.
The reason we're talking about Superman is starting next week, we're coming out of Convergence and starting a whole new series of stories that we're focusing on, and we're going to focus on Superman because I think, to me, it's a huge deal that the both of you, two people I consider friends and two people who I consider giants in the industry when it comes to Asian American representation in comics, are steering the granddaddy of them all, Superman. That's pretty cool. So I want to talk to you about how you're going to approach Superman, and why Superman resonates for people who are Asian American. Just a little bit of background. I'm, those of you who are watching and listening to this podcast out there, you may or may not have known about a little anthology book that I had a hand in creating called Secret Identities that came out about 6 years ago. And basically, we posited that Asian American and superhero narratives kind of dovetail with the Asian American experience, and I think Superman kind of encompasses that, and we kind of used his story as a launching pad for Secret Identities. And now we have you guys taking the reins of Superman. So I wanted to start first with Gene and ask how you came aboard, just how you got to work with DC Comics in general, because I know that you're not necessarily associated with superhero comics. How did DC approach you to be part of Superman?
Well, first, both Greg and I were part of Secret Identities. That was kind of just me dipping my toe into superheroes. I grew up reading superhero comics. I started collecting superhero comics when I was in the 5th grade, and I basically didn't really stop. I read them all the way through into my adulthood. And I don't know, I've been doing comics for a long time. I've been doing comics almost 20 years. I don't know why it took me this long to get into superhero comics. I did a book called Shadow Hero with an amazingly talented cartoonist named Sonny Liu that came out last year, and that was my very first superhero story. And then immediately after that, thank you.
You mean that book?
That book right there. That's right.
Yeah,
that book right there.
Impressive. That's good.
Yeah, and then within I don't know a year, less than a year of that book coming out, I'll be working on the character that started the entire genre, the very first superhero of them all. I guess the way it came about was it's not a super exciting story. My agent had a talk with Dan DiDio, who's one of the head guys over at DC, and I don't know how that conversation went, but after that conversation, my agent came back and said, "Would you be interested in doing Superman?" And I thought about it for a while, and I said, "Yes." I was a little freaked out. I got to be honest. I was a little bit freaked out about it, but I did.
I was thrilled when I heard about it. I did one of those jumping up and down in my room when the editor told me, just because I'd known Gene for years. I remember way back when I was working, first started working at Marvel. Actually, it was in the middle of the Planet Hulk run I did. Gene and Derek Kirk Kim and I got together in San Francisco at a diner or something, and just hung out a little bit. And I was just, I really admire the stuff he's done over the years, and was thrilled when he came on board. And it's been a blast working with him.
Well, that was, I got to be honest, at the risk of this becoming just like a major mutual kiss butt session.
That's why we're here.
That's my favorite.
Greg being on action, Greg being part of Team Superman would definitely helped my decision. That was part of what I was freaked out about, is that I've never written in continuity before, and knowing that somebody that I admired and trusted would be part of that process was very helpful.
Well, and Greg, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, you're kind of like the veteran here, and which is interesting because you mentioned Planet Hulk, and I think, before 2013, I think when most people associated you with comics, they definitely thought about, Phoenix, they thought about Planet Hulk, you were very much associated with Marvel, and now, since 2013, I think you've been on Superman, Batman, and you've been on Action Comics now for almost 2 years. Like you're firmly entrenched in the world of Metropolis, and how has that kind of helped you bring Gene into the fold?
Well, first off, it's just been a blast. I mean, every once in a while you get on a character and things just click, Some characters are harder to kind of step into than others. By the end of it, I fall in love with whatever character I'm writing. You have to, you kind of have to in order to do the book. But some are just easier to understand. Like when I was doing the Red Skull book for Marvel back in the day, it just took me a long time to wrap my head around it because I was writing about a Nazi. You know what I'm saying? And a guy or a kid who becomes a Nazi, and that's a hard thing to figure out.
Right.
Superman, the Hulk, Adama in the Battlestar Galactica comics. I mean, those are three characters, just a few examples of characters that I felt like they just made sense to me from the get-go. The whole, I don't know, and I don't know exactly why that is or what all those reasons are, but it felt very very smooth stepping in to work at DC and work on those Superman books. I had a good rapport with, or have a, from the beginning had a really good rapport with the editor, Eddie Berganza, and we talked a lot about Superman, and I think we had a similar notion of the ethos of the character and interesting places we could push him. And so it's been fun, and then being able to work with folks like Gene and Pete Tomasi, who's now doing the Superman Wonder Woman book, it's been fantastic. I mean, I did a lot of stuff with Charles Soule when he was writing the Superman Wonder Woman book earlier, so it's been fun. And Aaron Cooter, who is drawing action, has been particularly amazing to work with. We started off together on that book, and with him as the artist and me as the writer, and now after doing it for about a year and a half, we're co-writing it because the collaboration just felt like it needed to go that place, and it's been amazing. He's an amazing storyteller, and has become a great buddy too. So having a chance to work with folks like that makes the whole thing really smooth. I mean, as smooth as it can be, because comics are crazy.
Yeah.
But it makes it fun.
Well, I know for Gene, I mean, the notion of writing a monthly superhero comic must be a little intimidating, since you come from the world of like writing your own independent graphic novels. You have done some floppies in the past where I know you've written the Avatar and the Korra books, but this is your first monthly. Make sure you get the scripts in on time. Working continuity. How's that process been for you coming from?
It has been. It feels a little bit like jumping into the deep end of the pool, jumping into the ocean, dude. That's what it feels like. Honestly, it's like it took me a little while. I have to tell you, now that I've been, I think part of it is that DC's been going through a ton of transition as well. As soon as I came on, they were in the middle of moving their offices from New York, where they've been since they began existing. They're moving to LA. So I think that has contributed to some of the craziness. But I have to tell you now, I deeply admire writers who have been at monthly comics for a long time. I think it is a totally different animal from writing graphic novels. I remember talking to Greg in December when we were talking over just ideas about what would come out in June, and I was like, isn't this kind of late? Because for my first second books, like everything has to be done. All the art, everything, all the copy editing is usually done a year before the book comes out, right? So to be talking at the outline stage about something that would be out on the shelves in less than 6 months, I thought was just nuts. And then I found out that this is just kind of the way it normally is.
Yeah,
that's actually a long lead time.
Yeah.
6 months.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
I was a little. I had to I almost did a little double take when Gene was so surprised by that, because I've been working in comics. Most of my experience in publishing is comics. I've only done one traditional book through a traditional publisher, and I was shocked by how long that was. It was like, what? It's gonna come out in 2 years? That's nuts. Comics is insane, but I guess I'm just kind of used to it, and it's fun. One of the gratifying things is that the stuff comes out so fast that you're learning so much all the time. It's not like you're working on one project that comes out in 2 years, and then you work on another project that comes out in another 2 years. You're you have stuff coming out every, sometimes every week,
Yeah.
and so constantly you have that chance to kind of see how it all came together and learn from it. So, I mean, it'll drive you a little crazy sometimes, but it's fun.
Everyone's first taste of Gene's Superman was in the free comic book that came out. So I know a lot of people have been talking about the new direction of Superman, that his secret identity's been outed, and we're still in the new 52 Super. I know that Convergence kind of brings all the other versions of Superman together, but we're still using the new 52 version of Superman. Is that correct? I just want to make sure.
It's the new 52 continuity without the branding.
Right.
Is that right, Greg?
Yeah.
So, get it right. Make sure you get it right.
Yeah.
It's the Superman. It's the same character I've been writing for all this time, and but it's just some awesome new things are happening.
So can you talk a little bit about how you decided to, I know that there's the new power that he has. I think it's called the solar flare. He's got a new look. He's wearing the old Max Fleischer-esque. How much of that came out of your discussions in December, and how much of that was already kind of baked into the character?
Well, I think Team Superman was given kind of a mission. We were told to push the character in new directions, and that's in the beginning when we were all talking about it as a team. We were just brainstorming about how that could be. How could we stay true to the character, but push him in a direction that he just hasn't gone before? So the outing of his secret identity was one piece, and having some of his what makes him Superman stripped away. Some of the more superfluous pieces of what makes him Superman stripped away. We wanted that to be a part of it. So we wanted a visual. Almost like a visual reflection of that reality, and that's why he's got this more pared down look to him, with the old ass, with just a t-shirt and jeans, with even losing his spit curl.
Yeah, we got together multiple times. We did phone meetings, we did actual physical in the same room meetings, and we emailed a lot. But and so it came together organically. I mean, it was all of us pitching in and bouncing these ideas around. And one of the really exciting things towards the end was that we were all in the room, and Aaron was drawing while we were talking. And so, as we're talking about these different ideas, Aaron is doing sketches of what what Superman might look like now in this new status quo. And it all kind of started to come to life when we saw those sketches start to appear. It was a fun experience.
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely looking forward. I mean, I think a lot of what people have gotten people talking again, like his new look and his new powers, and just the potential storylines that can come out of all of the things that have been laid out as far as, again, with the secret identity and the. Because I think one of the things I'm excited about is the fact that I think when he uses that flare, he loses his power. He becomes human for a short amount of time.
That was actually introduced before I even came on. That was a Jeff Johns and John Romita Jr. thing. Yeah,
but where we go, so it was nice to be able to take elements like that and see where they could go. So that leads directly into the shenanigans that we're up to in the books in June.
Well, one of the things, and I don't know if it's just me projecting, because I know that you guys are both working on the character now, but I feel like his new look with the buzz cut and everything, Superman looks a lot more Asian American than he did at any time in the past.
The plan is working.
The title of this podcast is Truth, Justice, and the Asian American Way, by the way. But I think, and this takes me to the next point that I want to talk about, especially having the both of you on the show and knowing our history again with secret identities and talking about Asian American superheroes, is the fact that, Superman, first of all, is the granddaddy. He's the original Superman. He's the one from which all superheroes come from. And I know that Gene talks a lot about this when he gives talks at colleges and schools and does presentations about the idea of Superman kind of being the embodiment of that immigrant hero, because he comes from the minds of Schuster and Siegel, and who are Jewish immigrants themselves. And there's a lot of that we as Asian Americans kind of project on the character. I mentioned secret identities earlier. We did this shorts interstitial where we tell stories. We tell essentially the Superman story, but we overlay it from Asian experiences. So like the idea of someone being sent away from a you know, in Superman's case, it's a world ending, and it's also kind of relates to people leaving like a war-torn country in like the fall of Saigon or something like that. And you also have him being, you know, the world's first illegal immigrant or illegal alien, literally an alien. And you also have him being a transnational adoptee. Like these are all Asian American experiences, Asian immigrant experiences. How much of that experience can you relate to as an Asian American with Superman?
I mean, I think that's one of the things that draws me to the character. Superman is such. He's a pretty old character, and he's just been through a ton of phases, and there are all sorts of facets of him, you know. And I think when you look at the history of Superman, he goes through these different cycles. But the pieces of his character that I relate to the most are those reflections of that immigrant experience. I really think, I mean, I think Superman can be Asian American, but really I think deep down he's a Jew. You know, he's an immigrant who can pass if he wants to, like a lot of early Jewish Americans. But who also has to deal with this dual identity, with this piece of him that's super foreign, that the people around him just don't understand. And I really think those conventions of who he is have really blossomed into this superhero genre, where, you know, that dual identity is really a part of almost every superhero that's out there now. That I think as the child of immigrants, as somebody who spoke Chinese at home and had a Chinese name at home and an American name at school, I think I gravitated towards superheroes because of that dual identity.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm biracial, so I'm half Korean and half white, and I grew up in Texas and moved to the big city, New York. So I don't know. There's some. I think definitely the Superman story has resonated with me because of, you know, my Asian American background, but also because I'm bicultural, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've got you know, Superman's Kryptonian and Kansan, you know, and also, yeah, and that experience of being a you know, I mean, not Dallas is a small town, but a suburban kid. I wasn't a farm boy, but I was a suburban kid, and then going to the big city. You know, also, and you know, one of the things, you know, I think also that notion of citizenship and of, you know, hyper consciousness of what it is to be a citizen and an American, maybe as part of how I grew up. I mean, I was a Boy Scout, and that, you know, desire to figure out what the right thing to do is at all times, you know, and to strive towards that and muck it up from, you know, constantly, because that's a very hard thing to do. But all of those things are things that just resonated with me, and, you know, some of those are just me, some of those are, you know, part of being Asian American. But, you know, I can't say exactly what's what, but the character definitely made sense to me from the beginning.
But how significant is it, though, that both you and Gene, I mean, the other thing about you and Gene is that you are also very, very conscious about Asian American identity. It's not that you're not just writers who happen to be Asian. Like you talk about that, you know, I know you guys personally, you talk about this a lot when you're on, you do panels, when you do presentations, you talk about how much your identity informs your work. Like, how important is it? How important are you? That you know, the two flagship comic book, the Superman comics, it's Action Comics and Superman. Those are the granddaddies, right? Are being steered by two Asian American writers. I mean, I personally, I think that's a big fucking deal.
Well, we're gonna reveal that Krypton is actually a small village in Vietnam.
Yes.
No, that's a scoop, guys. That's actually true. That's not rumor. Twitter, Tumblr,
That's
make
right,
sure you,
that's
all the angry tweets.
Small Vietnamese village named Krypton.
At Gene Luen Yang.
Yeah, all the superheroes are actually Asian. It's not Bruce Wayne. It's Bruce Wang. And,
yep, that's right, Bruce Wayne.
Peter Park. He's Korean.
Yeah, that's
yes.
right.
No, but
don't get me. Well, you know, and that's the other thing. The other interesting thing, going back to what makes Superman so interesting as an Asian American superhero, you know, we're now in an era where comic books are constantly being adapted to live action, and in that adaptation, that's where you have room to cross-racially cast an actor in a role that's traditionally white, and you see the controversy that surrounds that. Michael B. Jordan as Human Torch, for example, as just one case. But the funny thing about Superman is that he is the only superhero who was successfully cross-racially cast, and no one made a big deal about it. Let's look at my man Dean Cain.
There you go.
Played Superman for 4 years, and actually Kristen Crook played Lana Lang, another iconic Superman character, another Asian American actress. So, and the thing about these two roles is that no one lost their shit over it. Why is that?
I don't know. I think maybe there's an inherent foreignness that's just part of who Superman is, and the fact that Dean Cain has just a hint of it maybe worked in his favor. I don't know.
Well, you also have to realize the internet was not active at that time.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. There is that.
Yeah, that's
point.
Part of the reality.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled they did that, though. I remember seeing that a bus drive by with Dean Cain on it and with the Superman thing. I was like, that guy's Asian. First time was like, no, and I was like, come on, I got that Hapa radar here. I know.
Yeah.
I know exactly what's going on here.
And I guess Dean is racially ambiguous enough that some people may not even realize that he's white Asian.
I mean, I wonder if both of them are racially ambiguous enough.
Yeah, Kristen Crook is pretty racially ambiguous too, I guess. All right, so that ruins my theory that just people are nicer back then before Twitter.
No, people are never nicer.
They just kept it in. They just kept it in.
No, people are the same as they've always been. It's just that there's a little more room to get both the good and the bad right now.
Yeah. So just looking back in the history of Superman, and not that this necessarily informs the stories you have going forward, but if you look back at the history of Superman, whether it's comics, movies, TV, is there one Superman story that resonates with you as far as something that you always return to, something that you just had left an indelible mark when you read it or when you watched it? Is there one Superman story that exists for both of you? We'll start with you, Greg. What's the one Superman story?
Well, I wouldn't say there's any one. I mean, there are different Superman, because all these characters.
Eras.
Yeah. These characters have been around for so long that one of the glories of them is that anything we do has been done before. You know what I mean? And but it proves that these characters are incredibly flexible. You can literally tell any kind of story with these characters, and that's a huge gift for us as writers. It's like, if you ever want to remind yourself of how much you can do, just go back and look at some of these older stories. I mean, you can do crazy sci-fi, you can do horror, you can do, you can do anything. You can do romance, So there are different stories from the past that I've loved for different reasons. I mean, a few of them that just come to mind. One of them is this story called The Juvenile Delinquents from Outer Space, which is a very old story about a couple of crazy juvenile delinquents from outer space that Superman has to deal with. It was in this big, oversized Superman book that I had. It was one of my first comics ever. That book also had a story, a kind of a mystery story where Superman was... like there was some future-telling machine that Jimmy Olsen was talking to, and the question, like, for whatever reason, like it said that the person who saves Superman's life will have the initials LL, and of course there are all these different people in Superman's past with the initials LL, and the whole story is like, Superman gets exposed to this this box of kryptonite, and he's dying, and he's trying to figure out which of these LLs will save him. And there's this I'm just gonna spoil it. There's and so he's thinking about all these different people, and they're all in different places, and none of them know that he's in trouble. And then finally this kid in a baseball outfit comes running up and closes the box, and Superman's like, that's not an LL, but then you look on his bag and it says Little League. So, but for me, at whatever age I was when I read that, 7 or 8, I just thought that was wildly clever.
That is wildly clever. Yeah, you were correct.
But I mean, like that kind of stuff. I mean, one of the fun things about that is just the mythology of the LL initials, and then all that kind of arcana that's part of these kinds of comics. You know, the just the mythology that it builds up is a lot of fun. I mean, and actually, Aaron and I are introducing our first LL character to the Superman universe.
There's a new LL.
There is indeed. There is indeed. So keep your.
Is it LL Cool J?
Yes, it's LL Cool J.
Yes.
And no, but it's going to be awesome. It's going to be in Action number 41, so keep your eyes open.
Can't wait for that.
But a more recent story that kind of blew my mind was Jeff Loeb and Tim Saul's Superman for All Seasons, which is I mean, it's fairly recent, but it's got a real classic feel to it.
Yeah.
Jeff just loves all of the. I mean, I worked with Jeff on some Hulk stuff when I was at Marvel, and I love that guy. He has so much love for these characters, you wouldn't even believe it. And yeah, I mean, he did that. Superman for All Seasons is just a massive love letter to all these characters in the Superman mythos. I homaged it a few times during the course of my run in different ways. But yeah, no, I mean, that's a recent story I like. And then the last one I'd mention is a totally different kind of Superman, but it's the Superman in Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns.
Oh, interesting.
You know, like the kind of the Superman who's basically serving the country and doing what he's told, and is kind of scary as a result. You know, I mean, he remains Batman's best friend, but he's also a major antagonist in that story, and it's just a really great alternate vision of what Superman could be.
How about you, Gene? Is there a particular story or era of Superman that resonates with you?
I really like the Alan Moore classic, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. I thought that was pretty amazing. I thought it was amazing how much he was able to do with such a short page count. You know, it was a surprising amount of depth. I also am a huge Bruce Timm fan. So it's not a comic, but I love the way Superman was used in all of Bruce Timm's work in animation, especially in Justice League Unlimited. I mean, the climactic finale for that series was this showdown between Superman and Darkseid, and it was awesome. Like he just unleashed in this way that you rarely see. I mean, Superman, I think, is usually a fairly reserved character. That's kind of He doesn't often lose control, and that was one of the few times when he lost control, and it was completely in character.
And maybe you'll see some of that again in June.
Yeah, yes, maybe you will. Maybe you will.
Nice.
And you know, after I signed on to write Superman, I actually read this Glenn Weldon book called The Unauthorized Biography of Superman, and that led me to reading a lot of those early. You know, the early Action Comics, the very first issues of Action Comics, and he was kind of like his
hardcore
personality was really different, right? Than the Superman that we all picture in our heads. He was a little bit more brash. He was a little bit more intense and a little bit more reckless, and there's something I think very very refreshing about that. So maybe we'll be able to get some of that back too.
Well, and I think that's true about you know, with when New 52 came out, and I have gone on record being critical of New 52, and I will say, but I do think that I think it was Grant Morrison's, the one with the T-shirt and the cape, like some people kind of criticize like that Superman, but I think that was kind of a throwback to those.
Yeah, it really was.
Comics.
Yeah. The personality, the way he dealt with things, the youthfulness of how he acted was all a throwback to early Action Comis.
I'll just say, not that anyone cares what I think, but
I care, dude. I care deeply.
If I had to list a couple of my favorite Superman stories, one of my all-time favorite Superman books is Superman's Secret Identity. That's I think it's Kurt Busiek. It's basically about if Superman existed in the real world. It's about this guy named Clark Kent, whose parents named him Clark Kent because they thought it was funny, and every year for his birthday he gets all this Superman memorabilia, and then one day he wakes up with like his powers, and it's a really great book. I always thought that when they were, you know, they were always rebooting the Superman movie franchise, I thought it would be like, it would take a lot of balls to like get Charlie Kaufman to write that adaptation. Yeah. And make that the next Superman movie franchise. But it's a really great book. If you can find that, I definitely recommend reading that. And I've also gone on record being a huge Smallville fan. So I have a soft spot for Smallville as far as how they, and Jeff Loeb worked on that for a few seasons, and that was definitely inspired by Superman for All Seasons, as I think the creators of the show kind of reference that a lot in the series. So yeah, I mean, there's so many Superman stories that, and like Greg said, he's been around so long. He's 77 years now, right? He's coming up on the big 80. What's left? What's left to tell? And this is kind of my roundabout way of getting you to drop some hints and secrets on what next
Well, we
month.
are, you know, I think the cat is out of the bag, and Superman's secret identity will be revealed to the world. It is not a fantasy. It's not a dream sequence. It's not an alternate universe. It's the real deal, and we're going to see the consequences of that. I don't think that's ever happened in quite this way, and it's a blast to have the chance to run with that. You're also seeing I mean, one of the big things that one of the things that I think will be a lot of fun is you're going to see Superman as an underdog. You know, I mean, Superman's the classic overdog, right? But what happens if Superman's the underdog? And how does that change, or how does that affect him? How does that affect everybody around him?
That's the one complaint against Superman, isn't it? Like, you always hear people who have either written Superman or, like, you know, critique Superman in films or whatever. They say, like, he's perfect. How can you make him anything but perfect? He has all of the powers. He has none of the weaknesses. So you guys have kind of cracked that code and figured out a way to make him not this all-powerful.
We'll see.
Yeah, you'll have to read all the books.
I think another dynamic that is been on my mind as I've been working on the character is that, you know, he's known as the Man of Tomorrow, and in the 1940s when he came around, or late 1930s when he came around, he really was the Man of Tomorrow. He was an embodiment of what America thought of as the future. So back then, the future was individualized. It was much more physical, right? So Superman manifests himself in all these physical strengths. And now I don't think we think of the future in the same way. You know, the future is distributed. It's not owned by a single individual, and it's no longer just about physicality. It's much more about intellect and virtual reality and these other more heady things. So I think there's a tension there. There's a tension to what does it mean to be the man of tomorrow, a man of tomorrow who was conceived in the 1930s and 40s, but actually exists in the tomorrow of his conception.
That's really interesting.
So we'll see how much of that ends up on the page. But I'm telling you right now, that was in my head as well.
No, but I think that's a really great point, because, like you said, that, you know, we're living beyond the future that they imagined, right? Like, when you look at, like, the World's Fair and all of that, you know, if you go to Epcot Center and Disney World, like, we are so far beyond what, like, future, like, they predicted the future would be. Is that how do you reconcile that now that we exist in the 21st century? It's like it's like Back to the Future too. Like, you know, that seemed so far away 30 years ago, and now we're here, and it's like, where's my hoverboard? You know?
Yeah, that's the thing I'm most pissed off about those movies. Where is the hoverboard?
You know that there was actually a thing on. I just saw somebody just did a working prototype of a hoverboard today.
Yeah, they actually invented the hoverboard. I think that's a real thing. And
but you can't buy it at Target, dude. It's not the future until you can buy that thing at Target.
Yeah, it's 6-7 years.
Apparently, Nike is actually re-releasing the self-lacing Nikes, and this time with the actual mechanism to self-lace. So
awesome.
What?
Yeah, so Nike, a couple years ago, Nike released Marty's shoes.
Oh.
But they didn't self-lace. They just look like them. And I read somewhere that this year they're working to actually release. They figured out a mechanism to self-lace the sneakers, and they're going to put those out for, like, all.
I'm glad people are working on that.
Finally. These are the things that are, and, you know, my daughter who was recently introduced to the Back to the Future films, and we talk about this all the time. She keeps saying that, like, you know, that movie took place in October, so there's still time between now and then to invent all these future things. So
there you go.
Yeah, who knows? Anyway, why are we talking about Back to the Future? We're supposed to be talking about Superman.
But, like, the idea of a secret identity too, right? Is
right.
Information that is kept enclosed, that is kept in a singular fashion. I don't know if that works in the modern world. In the modern world, information kind of gets distributed. It gets diffuse. So that's another aspect of this whole dynamic that we're going to be
I
playing.
mean, another sort of thematic thing like that I've been thinking about, that we've all been thinking about a lot is the whole first storyline we're doing is called Truth, Superman Truth, and the question of, there's a God, I love that first Superman movie so much, the Richard Donner movie with Christopher Reeves and Margot Kidder, but there's a very famous bit in there where he says, "And I never lie." And I love that, but at the same time,
he's lying when he says it.
He's a liar. No, I mean, I think that it's interesting to kind of unpack that. Like somebody who never lies is somebody who is living in a fantasy world. I mean, don't lie, kids. But what I'm saying is that Superman absolutely would. Clark Kent would lie if it's going to save lives. You know what I mean? Like he's going to be held to some formal set of rules that could be used against him or against other people. If at the same time, there are consequences to those things. And so I think being able to unpack that simplistic notion of the Boy Scout Superman and to look at it to really dig into that and look at that, look at all the consequences of that, both pro and con, I think is a really fun thing that we're going to be doing. It's a high stakes, like the story we're telling is really high stakes. Superman is very, he's the underdog. He's very vulnerable, and the story will push him into different territory. And I think that's not just in terms of what he can physically overcome, but what he's of the kind in terms of like the kind of who he is and how he's going to deal with things, on an emotional level, on an ethical level, that stuff is prime storytelling material.
One of the things I'm most looking forward to, honestly, I mean, when the news broke, and I think when I read that in the Free Comic Book Day issue, about like giving up the secret identity and all of this, not apart from all of the story possibilities that opens up, one of the key tenets of Superman is the notion of who's the real identity. Is it Superman? Is it Clark Kent? Yeah. Right? And by kind of blowing that up, you're really tackling that head on, and I think that, I mean, and feel free to tell us which one you choose as the real identity, or is it one of the things that one of the scenes that I really disliked in Kill Bill was the scene where David Carradine explains how Superman's using the Clark Kent persona is Superman's critique of the human race. And I just thought that was a fundamental misunderstanding of who Superman is and who Clark Kent is. I said before, like, Smallville is one of my favorite Superman stories, and it really talks about how Clark Kent is the identity. He grew up. That's who he grew up as. He grew up as Jonathan and Martha's son, and that's who he sees himself as. Superman is kind of like a persona he takes on, or is it? Is Superman who he always was and has been, and then that's like, who's the real person? Is it Superman? Is it Clark Kent? Is it Kal-El? How are you guys like?
Well, I think that's another one of those things that kind of, it swings back and forth throughout the history of the character. So there are certain times where he definitely is more Superman than he is Clark Kent, and then there are other times where the Clark Kent side defines who he is. For our, I don't know. I think we kind of have to let things play out the way they want to play out organically. But I'll tell you, for me, like taking it back to the immigrant experience, I think one of the things that immigrants' kids especially struggle with is this idea of creating a holistic, unified identity. So you have a set of codes, a name that you use at home, a language usually that you use at home, and then another set of codes, another name, another language that you use at school. And then at some point in your growing up, in the process of becoming an adult, you have to figure out how to combine these two things into a single unified understanding of yourself. So for me, when I approach Superman and I approach him losing this, I don't even see it as necessarily him losing his secret identity. It's more he's losing that wall that separates these two pieces of himself. Like, what does that mean for him? How's he gonna combine these two things together? Regardless of what people call him, how's he gonna be like create a unified experience for himself or a unified identity for himself?
Yeah. This is one of those questions. There is no wrong answer to this question in the sense that the character has been around forever. Exactly as Gene says, there's a million different ways you can explore this character. Those are all valid at different times. That's it's whatever. I mean, the glory of the character is that is that you can interpret this character many different ways. For me personally, I've always thought of, I'll just say it, he's Clark. That's who he is. That's who he grew up as. That's from his fundamental basic experiences as a kid were all as Clark Kent. Later on, he learned that he's all of these other things as well. So that adds on to that. But fundamentally, he's this kid from Kansas, son of Jonathan and Martha, who's trying to figure out how to do the right thing in the world. And honestly, that's what makes the character compelling to me, because he is an entirely understandable, everyday person with massive responsibilities, and who is, and in a weird way that actually, that's exactly like everybody, because all of us, we start off just as as kids who have things taken care of for us, and then gradually as we get older we realize we have our own responsibilities, and then gradually as we get older we realize that those are actually massively huge responsibilities, that each one of us has the capacity to save or destroy lives every day. I mean, and that sounds like an exaggeration, but it's not really. I mean, it plays out in very small ways usually for most people, but we all have that that capacity to make a big difference, and so I think that's one of the reasons why Superman's story resonates, why Clark's story resonates, because we all have that. I mean, we've all had our hearts broken or broken hearts, and Superman lets us experience that in a huge way. You know what I mean? To explore that, I guess, in a very through a kind of safe fictional environment where those risks are played out on the hugest scale, but they still resonate with real life.
Well, I think we're going to leave it at that. I want to thank my guests tonight. I could actually continue and talk about Superman for much longer than the 45 minutes that we've been spending this past episode. But I want to thank my guests for this evening, Greg Pak. When Action 41, when does that come out?
I believe that's the first Wednesday in June. Oh, by the way, one thing I think we can plug is that you are going to find out all of the explanations for the big decisions and all the crazy stuff that happened in the Superman book. So do not miss that. You're going to see some of the repercussions of it all in the action book. So don't miss that. In other words, buy them all. Buy it all.
Yeah, that's right.
And also Batman Superman number 21, which is also part of the big Truth, the Truth storyline, comes out on June 10th. And then I believe the next week, June 17th, you can get Superman Wonder Woman. And then Gene's book on June 24th, Superman.
June 20. That's right. So June is Superman month at DC Comics. Gene, thank you for being with us, and good luck to you as you venture through the streets of Metropolis.
Thank you, Keith. It's always super fun to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining. Thank you at home for watching and listening to Hard Knock Life. I'll see you next time.
NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard Knock Life, comics, movies, and TV. Yo, pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the Hard Knock Life, but not the chica kind. More like the people in the world seeking perspectives with a different line. The kids who share the interest together with a similar kind. When they said John Glover for Spider-Man, they didn't mind. The activists, directors, comments, and the lectures. Fanboys, professional artists, and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the NOC.